Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Glad to be back, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Mark, the U.S. government admitting inflation is at its highest rate in 40 years. What does this mean to investors?
Well, I suppose if you own real estate, you're doing well. Those prices are up. Agricultural products are way up. Things like soybeans and corn and, all the basic commodities, are higher. Base metals have been roaring up to new highs. So, old people that are involved in, zinc and copper and, palladium, platinum, all the things that lithium and so forth, are benefiting, from that. The stock market, was off a little bit today, Thursday, as the bond market sold off and everybody, panicked and they sold off stocks a little bit. Overall, our model for the year is not positive. We talked about this before. There's going to be some volatility this year, and whether it's going to be significant or minor, only time will tell if we take out certain support levels. There's automated programs out there that sell, and things could, potentially get nasty in a computer-driven environment. But we know the January barometer, the first 5 days was negative and the month was negative compared to the close in December for the S&P, and nothing is carved in stone, and it's just a very rough indicator, but it sort of says 2022, or at least part of it, may not be so great. And, we're in this February, March period, we talk about Groundhog Day and stuff, a couple of weeks either side could be negative, which has been the case every year or most years, and then you got the March phenomenon coming up. It's tough to call, but you got the Ides of March, you got the vernal equinox. We've seen important market change points in mid-March. I guess the most recent classic example was the March 2020 low when we had the COVID panic. The big bottom came in, just virtually bullseye to the vernal equinox, and then we took off from there. Some years it might invert, but it's definitely a time frame to be watching for. Interesting thing is the Fed hasn't raised rates yet. They're just jawboning and talking about it. And I'm not saying it won't happen, but, a lot of this is anticipation of the Fed doing something, and what they do, nobody really knows. Is it going to be a quarter point, half point, full point? But it's still ridiculously low interest rates compared to where we were when you talk about record inflation. You're looking back to 1979, 1980 time frame, and the stock market was, measurably lower at that point. I can't even compare, where we are now versus there. And, in a certain sense, you got to be a contrarian. I guess what I'm saying is, companies are still making money. Interest rates go up half a point or even a point. From zero, you're still talking historically low stuff. The consumer is still spending. I'm saying things aren't so bad out there, but, there's a lot of manipulation in the markets too, and traders make money on the upside and the downside, and if they can break the market, that gives traders a chance to make money on the short side and buy stuff cheaper. There's all kinds of shenanigans out there. But today, we did see the bond market break and people are selling stocks, and, maybe there's some outlier event coming. Maybe there's an asteroid coming, Jim. There's an article in Forbes magazine. I don't know if we talked about this last week. Of all places, Forbes, which is a financial magazine, and I apologize if I'm repeating the story, but the headline was, "Hey, we may survive. Civilization may survive if an asteroid hits the Earth." And this is in a financial magazine. I almost fell out of my chair when I saw this. And I've been talking about this stuff for last couple of years in our interviews, and people think I'm like nuts. So, maybe there is something out there. There's supposed to be this SpaceX rocket that's supposed to crash into the moon sometime in early March. Is that going to affect the moon's orbit or do something crazy there? The solar flare activity is still increasing. There's all kinds of stuff, volcanic activity on the planet. That's probably one of the reasons why commodity prices are moving up, because that Samoan volcano, takes a year or more for some of those clouds to circle the Earth, and maybe it will reduce temperatures, and of course that's going to frustrate the global warming people, but that could reduce crop production. I mean, maybe there's another maybe there's a super volcano explosion coming somewhere else. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there. The market is like intuitive about the future. It's seeing or feeling something. And I don't think this is necessarily about Ukraine or whether the Iranians get the atomic bomb or whether Taiwan is taken over. There's other stuff out there, and everybody's so, nervous and, on and on and on. But, the market had a big run, and it's, due for a correction. And I guess if it takes out those September lows, there could be more selling. But look where the market is. I mean, it's still a bull market chart. If you pull up the big charts, the weekly charts, I mean, this is not a bear market yet. I mean, maybe one is going to unfold, and I'm not trying to be, cynical about that possibility. Sure, it could happen, but, the markets are still high, and I still think the Dow is probably going to go to 40 to 60,000 here in the next 5 to 10 years, a much higher level. So if you're long term, this really doesn't mean very much. But as a trader and looking to time the market, I guess you got to be a little nervous here during some portions of this year, particularly, I guess, into mid-year, and see what happens. But, part of me is, the Fed's been jawboning, threatening to do it. They actually haven't done anything yet, but the market is anticipating it coming, and they may be overreacting a bit. So, we may be surprised. It may be a shallow correction, not necessarily the big one everybody's looking for. Time will tell. But if you're a trader, my comments are irrelevant because you're in and out and you're just taking advantage of short-term swings. I would say if you're a long-term investor, you stay with the market. You've done well in the last 20 years or 30 years, despite, huge sell-offs along the way. If you're more timing oriented, I guess, you might want to watch it here because there is some risk perhaps, into mid-year. But, we've got the election coming up, the midterm elections in November, and you would think that the powers that be would try to keep things, looking good into that midterm election. I don't think a market crash or a lot of negative, political or economic activity is going to help the Democrats here in the U.S. So I think they would want to do what they could to keep things going. But a lot of interesting stuff out there. Crude oil is high. Nobody thought it was going to go this high. I've been talking about this for months and months and months. That crude oil can get to 100 or 120, and maybe even 200 or 300 in the next 5 years because of the stupidity on the part of the liberals and the left who think that they could cut off the valve for crude oil and the world could still survive. So that's just going to create tremendous shortages. And what that means is you can make a lot of money in crude oil stocks and crude oil futures, and you can take advantage of this volatility to the upside too. So it doesn't mean that there might be a negative at the pump for people having to pay more. It's essentially a tax for individuals to pay more for gas and natural gas and gasoline and so forth. But if you're a trader and you're in the markets, and crude oil continues to run, there's a fortune to be made, trading that market. And if it does reverse, hopefully we can trade it back to the downside. So long-winded response there, Jim.
Well, I know you like to talk about geocosmic events, and we had one that the recently launched bunch of communication satellites. 40 of them have already been fried by those solar flares. X-rays and gamma rays are not kind to electronic equipment.
Yeah, if we get one of those Carrington events, which you and I have talked about for about 2 years here on and off, it'll shut down the planet. I mean, and people laugh, oh, that's not going to happen, can't happen. You get one big super Carrington solar flare hit the planet, internet's down, communications are down, all these satellites are wiped out, and it could take, I don't know how long it would take to recover from that. I mean, does it take 6 days or 6 years? I don't know the technological recovery period for a super strike like that from the sun. So there's something going on, and I've always been, ever since the COVID thing started, I'm so much of a cynic and a contrarian, and I just always thinking there's something else behind all this. When the first, people think I'm totally nuts bringing this up, but that's just who I am, and I think that's why I've been successful in being somewhat of a futurist looking at stuff. I mean, just this volcano that went off a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about a volcano a week before, and then it blows up. And then they think people thought I'm nuts even mentioning volcanoes. So that if you do your homework and you go to the Geocosmic site, there's a lot of sites that plot the earthquakes, they plot the position of asteroids, the sites that plot, the status of the volcanoes. I get reports every day on what's going on in Kilauea in the Hawaiian Islands. I get reports on the solar activity, on the position of, all kinds of geocosmic stuff. You got to pay attention to it. So I think maybe this whole COVID thing may be part and parcel to something that's coming, and we're being prepared for it. And I know it sounds totally left field, but if that virus was put out intentionally, and may still be put out intentionally, maybe they're trying to either kill off a lot of people or get people under control in some way, because God forbid something geocosmic hits and they got to get everybody indoors really quick. Getting people conditioned to wearing masks because they're responding to government authority might be necessary. That was sort of my initial reaction when it happened, that something bigger is happening than just the virus. And so far that's not been the case, but that's just the cynic in me, I suppose. But there is the crazy stuff going on out there, and including the extraterrestrial situation, which everybody laughs about, but we know, and I'm been convinced for several decades that it's not even a speculation about what's going on in terms of our communication with extraterrestrials and their involvement with the governments around the world, and have been for decades, and the reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technology, which has allowed us to make such tremendous progress in our aerospace and space programs, including those vehicles that were released originally secretly in 2017 and then released formally by the Pentagon in the last year or so. Maybe they're extraterrestrial, or maybe they are the reverse engineered craft that we have developed that so far advanced anything that we are publicly talked about that is out there. So they're out there. So where do we get that technology from? Are we so smart that we did it ourselves and they're just not telling us, or was it reverse engineered? So I'm in the camp that you're probably seeing both. You might see extraterrestrial craft, and you may see also craft that we reverse engineered, that we're testing and flying to the moon and Mars and every other damn place, which is part of the secret space program, which has been going on for, I think, since the 1970s or 1980s. So very interesting stuff out there. I just hope in my lifetime I get to really see the truth of all this, because there is a major cover-up underway and has been for decades. And why do we talk about it? Because that technology could have significant effect on all our lives if it's released to us, and we can take advantage of it. That maybe in a sense it's being selfishly used for military and other purposes, or by those who want to control other planets and control the moon, and they don't want anybody to get their hands on access, this type of access. I mean, if we've got craft that I'm convinced exist, and we've got a lunar base already well underway, and I believe we also have a Mars base underway for a long time, they don't want us to know about it. And I think there's this powerful political reasons why that's the case. Why let everybody know or benefit when a few can control the truth? So, we laugh about asteroids. We talked about this last week, the mining of asteroids. I mean, I think someone had already emailed back and thought I was nuts to have brought that up. I'm convinced our technology is that advanced that we've already begun to mine asteroids. We've already landed on one, and we sent a craft up just in the last few weeks to try to test redirecting the asteroids to protect the planet, just in case one actually gets too close to us. So SpaceX and NASA are all involved in advanced programs, and that, if they're trying to shift asteroids, they're probably already trying to mine them too, because of the tremendous assets that are on a few of those. So I just think we're just not told, and this has been pretty much the case with government my entire life, and probably with those who are listening. You're just not told the truth about stuff. You're already told what you're supposed to hear, and that's why the Freedom of Information Act down here in the U.S., when they release documents and they find a lot of stuff that we've been lied to and not told about over the decades, is no surprise to me. So anyway, long and short, here we are, and we'll see how the year unfolds.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, what's going on with gold right now?
Well, it's trying to fight its way out of a hole, as is silver, and theoretically we should be in a much stronger cyclic period. Generally a rally into February is what people normally look at, and it's sort of holding in this sideways pattern for a long time. I'm not a real super bull on gold or silver. I mean, I'm sort of we have some positions in it. One of the models I put together says we should have a run here into mid-year or thereabouts, whether it's already started or it's going to come after a March low point of some kind. But I'm not sitting here saying we're going to be, above the 2060 high we saw a couple of years ago, and we're going to 2,500, 3,000, 5,000. I mean, I've heard this for many, many years that we have to go to these huge levels. What I think people are not accepting or recognizing or want to talk about is the government manipulation of the market. I mean, there's so much research. Much of it is done by an organization that I've been very friendly with, and you can pull it up on the internet, GATE.org, GATE.org. Bill Murphy runs that organization, and they got 20 to 30 years of data showing the manipulation of the gold market. Governments lend gold that doesn't exist. We don't even know if there's gold in Fort Knox anymore down in the U.S., whether it's really there. They show one room in some video 20 years ago, and that's about it. It's really a phony market because it's not a free market. There's phony contracts that are sold on the COMEX, silver and gold for years. They hit bids, and there's nothing backing those contract sales. It's just a lot of government money that's being siphoned into the big brokerage firms, and the goal is to suppress the price of the metals. Why? Because a strong gold market makes the governments look bad. Meanwhile, they hoard the gold for themselves. China's out there accumulating gold. All the nations around the world secretly have been accumulating because they know for thousands of years it is a store of value, but they want to keep the price down for some reason because it just makes them look bad. So people say, why isn't gold going? Well, why hasn't gold really gone big for the last 20 years? I mean, it's up compared to where it was in the 1970s, and it has been a good long-term hold if you just sit with it. But it's not exploding to the big, big numbers. So unless the government ease up on their manipulation of the gold market and suppression of it, it may not do the big numbers. So I think from a long-term perspective, if we can take out the highs from a couple of years ago, that would be over like $30 in silver and 2060 in gold. But this is U.S.-based prices. Then maybe a run is going, and then we can start talking about some big upside projections. And maybe that will only happen if the suppression of gold ceases. And that's really, I read all these analyst comments. Oh, gold's up and down. It's inflation. It's interest rates. It's this story or that story. It really is suppression of the market, and a lot of research and evidence supporting that. Now, maybe they're going to change their tune and release their suppression and get out of the business of manipulating that market. And if they do, then maybe we'll have some of the big moves that everybody's hoping for. But you asked the question. I'm leaning a little more positive this year, and we'll see how it unfolds. But I don't know if we're going to go back to the big highs or break out. And we just see a retest of the highs. Maybe gold goes back to 1950 to 2000 range, and silver goes back to the high 20s, and maybe that's it. Or we break out. And if silver breaks out, I can see on the chart $75 as a potential target. I mean, if silver really goes to $30 with volume and it really breaks out in a big way, just looking at the charts, I could see where it could go to some big number, whether that happens in 6 months or 6 years, but it does look like that would be a potential target if it does break out. So let's see if that even happens.
Mark, before we go, can you tell us about the special offer for our listeners?
If you go to vrtrader.com, that's VR Trader, Victor Robert, TRADER, we have a bunch of newsletters up there. Metal Resource Letter, which has done very well, by the way, despite the fact that gold hasn't taken off big, because we're in all kinds of other stuff like lithium and crude oil and soybeans and corn and all kinds of other stuff that we consider resource play. But a bunch of letters there, and you insert the promo code, which is still 2021 half off. It says it sounds 2021 HALFOFF. You can get 50% off on any of the subscriptions.
Mark, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for putting me on the air. I love it. Thank you. Thanks again, Jim. Have a good week.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as vrtrader.com. If you have any questions for Mark or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.